Recording has begun. Let me go ahead and get in here. Let me get the slides going. Let me go ahead and begin sharing my screen. And bingo! So tonight we're going to be talking about domain 2. So when I took this pass, I want to say this occurred at the end of summer, but CompTIA changed the Security Plus standards. So on the SYO 501, which some of you guys may be using for study resources, this domain was technology and tools. Well, this has been done away with, and architecture and design has been moved to domain 2. So with this domain, it's all about how you implement a secure system. And it's thinking through security with physical and logical access controls. So one of the things that's going to be talked about that is displayed on screen is the defense in depth approach. And it's, if you look on screen, or for those of you guys that are here in person, you actually have copies of the slides that you can use and you can refer to. So defense in depth is designed so that, if you breach one layer, they're going to be met with another control. And we'll do a practical exercise here in a bit that deals with that. So, as the slide says, when dealing with threats, the assumption should always be that any layer can be violated or broken through. Thus, protection must be provided by sequential layers. One thing you're going to learn if you've worked in cybersecurity long enough is that there is not a one-size-fits-all security solution. So one of the things for the test that you're going to need to know pertains to security controls. So you're going to hear talk about administrative, technical, and physical controls. And ideally, all of these control types are going to be working together to protect a company's assets. So if administrative, with that, that's going to be policies and procedures. It's going to be onboarding an employee and offboarding. So, for instance, I worked as a barista locally, and one of the things I had to do when I turned in 2 weeks' notice was immediately after my last shift, I had to meet with someone to do an exit interview and to make sure that all my company, a little company ID they gave me for discounts was cut off and, all that sort of stuff. Technical controls, that's going to be implementing things such as group policy and using password policy where you're setting up a password expiration that has to change, setting up a firewall using Active Directory to assign access, authentication, and disk encryption.
Sorry, I'm trying to get myself muted.
Well, hey, for what it's worth, you get extra points for being here twice. And then the last one is physical controls, as we all saw tonight. So that's using a door that locks, setting up some fences and some cameras. So this is one of the things that I personally did not see on my test, but I've heard others talk about it. And one of the things is going to be talking about security and risk frameworks. So you have COBIT, which is created by ISACA, and it's to assist business to develop, organize, and implement operating procedures. Give me a minute as I mute my phone for one of my other coworkers giving me grief about this. And COBIT's designed to develop an overall control framework, and it includes security, risk management, and information governance. You have the ISO series. They are an international standard. So, they're developed, and it stands for actually, I can't even remember the acronym off the top of my head. But here within the U.S., especially for those of you guys here that work in defense, you're going to hear about the NIST 800 series. So you're going to hear, either 853 or 800-171. And those are a set of controls that has been developed by the Department of Defense and by the National Institute for Standards and Technology to help develop a framework for what security controls you need to have in place to handle your data. And one of the things that is coming down the pipeline, and there's talk about when it'll be implemented, is the CMMC, or Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. where they've taken elements from COBIT, ISO, NIST, and there's one other framework that's escaping my mind. And they've combined them into a framework that, based on the level of sensitivity that you have within your contract, that you're going to have to implement more and more security controls as you go through. So, are there any questions about that? If you have any specific questions with those frameworks, for the Security Plus, they aren't going to go too in-depth with those. They're going to look that you know what it is and you know a couple things about it. Actually, from when I took the test, I don't recall seeing any of those on it. So here on these slides, and you guys have a copy of them, that for those of you guys here in person, you have them physically, but for those of you guys online, that the slides were sent out, and these are just some basic things with it. So you have ISO, and it's a code of practice for information security management, ITIL, and its best practices, COSO, which is by managing internal risks, by identifying relative vulnerabilities and determining how much damage it would do if exploited. And you have COBIT, which is connected, and you see that more in the finance word, but it's connected with Sarbanes-Oxley, which is the standard used for how businesses can use your credit card data. So right now, I'm going to skip those. So some other things that you guys will need to know with it is with pertaining to laws, directives, and regulations. So some common acts of law that we have here within the U.S., you have Sarbanes-Oxley, which that deals a ton with finances and investing. Of course, everyone here that's seeing a doctor is familiar with HIPAA. That controls how healthcare data can be disclosed and who can be talked to and who can say what. You have the Graham-Leach-Billy Act, and a ton of these different ones. You have PCI DSS is another one that I've found I would recommend it being pertinent that you at least understand what it is. And that one deals more with credit card data, not Sarbanes-Oxley. I'm getting that mixed up. So PCI DSS is what you're going to see for handling credit card data. So that's going to be if you go to a gas station and you go and insert your card at the pump to pay, those devices have to meet PCI DSS compliance for that business to be able to use them, to make sure your data is being safely handled. It's similar to how when we talk about in the DoD world that you need to be compliant with your NIST 800-171, or when CMMC gets rolled out, you need to be CMMC compliant to be able to do business with the federal government.
So
it's not Sarbanes-Oxley. So Sarbanes-Oxley deals a bit more with, corporate and actually, so here.
But that one it is the credit cards with businesses, what they can.
So PCI DSS deals with credit card transactions over a business network. So for instance, if you go to Bridge Street and any shop there, ideally, the systems that they're setting up for you to use Apple Pay or put your card in, they're going to be compliant with PCI DSS.
Okay, so not
Sarbanes-Oxley. I'm getting that mixed up, and pardon me, I'm still a little frantic. So I'm jumping in a little bit ahead tonight. So, and here on this slide, they've, you have a little bit of a chart that talks about, for publicly traded company, they're going to need to be compliant with a regulation that's codified in law. They're going to need to be compliant with Sarbanes-Oxley. The frameworks that are going to be used for an audit, that's your COSO, SAS 70, and COBIT. And with HIPAA, COBIT's another framework that's going to be used to audit. So one of the things, the more you read into these different frameworks and do research into them, you're going to see bits and pieces of them that come across different fields. So one thing that you're going to hear talked about, and those of you guys that are professional have already heard these terms before, but who all here is familiar with due care and due diligence? for those of you guys, let me pull the chat so that way I can see it. So with due care, the easiest way to remember that is that you're going to do it correct. And due diligence is going to be due detect. So what I like to think about it is that when you're taking due care, I think of it, and I don't know if any of you guys have done anything with wood shop or anything like that before, but my grandfather had me help him on a couple projects he was doing. And he always told me, you measure twice before cutting once. With due care, you're making sure that something has been done right. Whereas with due detect, with due diligence, you're making sure everything's being done, that you aren't overlooking any detail in this project and process. Does that make sense? I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but I recognize first time you're hearing this, it can be a little tough. So
them are just general terms of the industry.
Yeah.
What would they ask about?
That's just something you need to know. I don't necessarily anticipate that would be on the test, but so needed to admit someone. So one of the things you're going to see these three terms thrown about. When we talk about compliance, that's going to be making sure that you're following the law, that you're abiding by applicable laws, regulations, standard, and other obligations. With regulatory issues, that just falls into legal. It's making sure that, hey, you're doing everything by the books. I don't know if any of you guys were reading in the news, but Google is being hit with an antitrust lawsuit that DOJ and I think 11 states have all signed on to sue them, and they're going to attempt to use some of the old monopolization laws to break up Google. So, and non-regulatory controls, that's something else that you may come across just in your field here. Kincaid, could you do me a favor and let Ben know? Shoot Ben a text, let him know we're in.
Okay.
So I hate to decline his call, but we've got recording going. And then privacy requirements, that's just going to be making sure that you're taking care of customer data. That, if you're working within a healthcare facility, that, you have pretty much everything you need to know about a person there, that, hey, that data is only being accessed by those who need to have access to it. So one of the things you have talked about with building a legal wall, so how that's worded, it's making sure that you have something to defend yourself with. So, when it comes to intellectual property, and that's a big thing, you actually see more and more, and a ton of legal arguments with guys that make YouTube videos, and with fair use, where people, they can take clips from movies, TV shows, or take audio clips and put it in the background. A trade secret, it's something that you keep to yourself within a company. So when I think about that, I think it's Coca-Cola in Atlanta, that they have that the exact recipe to Coca-Cola is kept in this big old vault, that only a handful of people know, or like KFC and their secret and their 12 spices and herbs. I don't know the slogan. With copyright law, that's referring to who owns, it's the original work of ownership. So typically, that when you see that, that's going to last the lifetime of the author plus an additional 70 years. So I don't know if any of you guys remember, and I want to say it was after 2010, where we had a ton of adaptations of Sherlock Holmes come out. Like you had one with Robert Downey Jr., you had one with Benedict Cumberbatch, you had just a ton of them. And the reason that was that Sherlock Holmes, some of Sir Conan Arthur Doyle's original works had entered public domain at that time. So, a trademark, that's very simple. It's something that identifies a company. and helps distinguish from one manufacturer to another. So, for instance, here at CyberProtex, and Kincaid, correct me if I'm wrong here, but we actually have a trademark of the vulnerability genes, which is a piece of software that we use.
We just got it. And then we also have one on
Got Cyber. So that's one of the things, if you've seen me or Ben wear the shirts, that's a trademark that we have. So with it, it's really just used to distinguish one brand from another. And then a patent, that just, it's a document that says that someone owns an idea. And, if you've studied history enough, and, if you want to read more about patents, I encourage you to read about Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla, some of their feuding.
So we need to know, like, the patent expiration?
I don't believe patents expire, to my knowledge. I don't believe they do. So, when it comes to dealing with privacy protection, you're going to have a ton of different methods to deal with that. So, and it's going to depend on what data you're dealing with, the extent that you're going to have more protections in place. So it's going to be, if you're dealing with individual users, it's going to be setting up passwords. It's going to be implementing encryption. It's going to be having some awareness training to where, if you get an email in your work account from a foreign prince going, I have 20 million in gold for you, just click on this link and give me your bank, your credit card number, the digits on the back, your zip code, and your mother's maiden name. So for self-regulation, that's where we're talking about PCI DSS, where businesses need to govern themselves in compliance with that rule. For corporation, we've talked about HIPAA being used in healthcare. And then, some additional examples that are listed here are high-tech, GLBA, and PID-EDA. So those latter three, I'm not incredibly familiar with off the top of my head. And then for government, the most major one that's listed here is the Patriot Act, which, interestingly, you have some discussion about whether or not that piece of legislation has expired or not. So.
Hey, I have a question.
Okay, what's your question?
What's the other two being on the laws of government?
Could you repeat that, Trent?
You said on the laws of government, you said the most important one was the USA Patriot.
Yeah, well, that's the most prevalent.
Okay. What is the other two being, though?
So with those two, I am not familiar with those. I know Ben built the slides, so I hadn't seen those two terms before. So I'm going to make a note of that on a notepad or on my computer here, and I'm going to look that up and email you, Trent. So,
all right.
So,
also, I did just look it up. Patents do expire.
Oh, they do?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, I don't think you would need to know on the test when patents expire.
He's another guy waiting.
Okay. Okay, let me. Click on. Yep. Okay, just admitted someone. Thank you for catching that. I didn't see notification. So, one of the other things that businesses we love to talk about, know about, is this concept of liability. And, biggest thing to know of liability, and this is how I have remembered it my whole life, is that deals with whether or not you can be sued for it. So, particularly when it comes to privacy and anytime you have a data breach. So, I actually believe, and I don't think it was a data breach, but Google recently had to send out a thing to all their users about how some of their Google Plus data was handled. And they were ordered to pay us a ton of money like, I think they had like a bulk of like, I want to say it was like 17 million, and each user could file for, the cost of what Google sold their data, you could get all of $5. But with liability, it's really coming down, particularly when it comes to PII or personal information, it's falling short of what you're required to do. So for instance, if you're a medical company and you have a data breach and people's social security numbers get out, or you've broken HIPAA compliance and you're liable for the damage done because of that breach, and it's a failure to conform to the required standard. So whereas the second bullet puts it, it's approximate causation and resulting injury or damage.
If you lose it to like a 0 day or something, you've got everything standard. Is that the liability?
That depends on how, it depends on how someone wants to sue it. One of the things that's becoming more and more prevalent is purchasing what is called cybersecurity insurance.
About to say, if they say like in their like contract that they will protect you,
Yeah.
you can sue them if they don't.
Yeah, and it depends on how the contracts are written. But cybersecurity insurance is actually designed to help cover you if you have a data breach. It's going to help cover the cost of litigation, or if you're hit with a ransomware attack, they're going to help you pay the ransom. But part of this domain is also, figuring out, we talked a ton through, just policy. And I know I'm talking a little fast, and I realize that's just me. So, I don't want to be running through it, but really for some of these things, you just kind of need to know high profile. So one of the other things that you're going to see, and you're going to see this possibly in a practical exercise, is configuring a security topology. And it's not going to be this exact way, but one of the things that you need to configure to consider when wanting to secure a network are some of the following things. So how many of you guys here have heard of a DMZ before? So between North and South Korea, that stretch of land is called the DMZ, and that's sort of no man's land. And when you talk about internet and network security, it's much the same way. Yeah. So a DMZ, it's sort of the end of no man's land. It's that space between your company's network and the open internet. Another term that you'll see, and I don't believe you'll see it on the Security Plus, but it's a good term to know, is something called a demarcation point. And it's at that point in your network where your responsibility for the data sent ends and where your ISP picks that up. So typically your demarc point in the home network is going to be your cable modem. So how many of you guys know about subnetting or have heard that term before? Okay. So for the Security Plus, you don't need to know a ton of the math behind it, but subnetting, you're in essence taking a block of private IP addresses that you have, and you're setting up separate subnets to help better classify your network. So think about subnetting as, think about your whole network as a big old pie. So you're going to cut out, about a quarter piece, and that'll be, hey, we're going to cut out this piece of the pie for our production network. You're going to carve out a section of your IP address range for your production network. Then you're going to go, well, we need to put finance and HR on their own little subnet for compliance reasons. So we're going to push them out there. It's really just breaking up a network into smaller, more manageable pieces. And typically, you're going to see subnetting come into a thing with VLANs, or virtual local area networks. And that's, again, where you see this a ton with switching, where if you're running cables from offices back to a switch, you're going to configure a VLAN for each of those different departments. Another thing is going to be figuring out remote access. If, let's say, for instance, that you're functioning as an IT contractor for another I'm drawing a complete blank. So I'm gonna grab a thing of water here. So I hope I'm not rambling on. So with remote access, if you're contracted by another company to do IT support, one of the common things that's going to be set up is that you need to be able to remote into a device. So for instance, if your company contracts CyberProtect to be your IT managed services provider, typically we're going to load an agent or something on your machine that allows us to remote in from here, so that way we can remotely manage your machine, and we don't, you don't have to be billed for someone coming on site, or especially today in the COVID-19 world where people might be concerned about having someone come on site that they don't know about. So I'm going to throw this out there, and I'm going to ask you guys in chat to go ahead and take a stab at it. Those of you guys here in the room, you guys can actually talk to me. So network address translation. What do you guys think that is? Just from those three words. So that's a separate protocol, and I can't recall the name. That is a good guess. Actually, you could use NAT for that.
The IP to the Mac.
No. So
You're already shaking your head.
you guys might be overthinking this. What is it that runs over port 53? I believe it's over port 53. If not, I'm going to look like an idiot, and it's on recording.
53 is domain names.
Okay.
That's what I was saying. That's what I was saying. Isn't it simply just breaking down that name?
So it's similar. So DNS, it will translate the IP address of a web server to a domain, such as Google.com to, let's just say Google decides to have 193.248. Blah blah. So NAT does a similar thing to that, but instead what they're doing, so you were a little right when you're talking about converting IPv4 to IPv6. That's a way you can do that, but typically you're not going to see NAT used with IPv6. And I'll explain that here in a moment. NAT, what it does is it converts private IP addresses to publicly routable IPs. So if you were to go home on your home network and open up Windows command prompt and use the command ipconfig, you're going to get a 192.168, a 10 address, something like that. But if you go and you Google what's my public IP, it's going to give you a different address. Yep. So it's more of the IP address of your modem. And part of it is because IPv4, there is a limited space. We talk, it can, but with it, IPv4, all of the publicly routable addresses have been taken up. So NAT has been set up to kind of keep breathing life into IPv4 so that everyone can access the internet. Now, with IPv6, you're not going to see NAT used because IPv6, it's going to generate a publicly routable IP address based upon the MAC of your device. Another thing that needs to be taken into account is voice communications. So with that, that's going to be allowing access over the network for Microsoft Teams, Skype, WebEx, or configuring protocols such as, I believe it's SIP, that you don't need to know that for this test. That's on the network plus, but you don't need to know that for here. And the last one is very simply network access control. And that's thinking through how people are going to access your network. It's going to be, are they connecting to a wireless access point? Are they wiring into the wall? Are they wiring to a switch? And thinking through that. So Do you guys have any questions with that? All of that making sense? I'm not talking too fast, or
So that, so you said that's going from public to private, or private to public, does it matter?
It can go both ways. Most times you see it's going from private to public. And that's a good clarification to make.
So in my whole neighborhood, if we all have Huawei, or whatever, we have the same IP address.
Possibly. It depends on how your it depends on how your ISP's got that configured.
What did you say before that? You said it was going from one to website.
It's with NAT, you're translating a private IP address to a public IP. So another thing that comes into play when you think about network security, it's talking about network hardening. And it's figuring through how are you going to secure your network. So one of the things you're going to see talked about is MAC limiting and filtering. And that's allowing access based upon the MAC address of your device. So for instance, if the computer I've got up here, if I were to set up MAC filtering to where I can only access, and I don't believe you can do this, let's talk hypothetically here, that I can only access SharePoint from this device. It's going to check the MAC of this device for accessing resources. To where I couldn't come in with this separate computer and then go, okay, I want to log into SharePoint on that other device. The MAC address is different, it would disallow access. 802.1x security, that is, give me a minute to pull, see if I've got a better slide for them. So it's that one, it's for secure network authentication. That is another area that tonight I am sadly drawing a blank on. So I would encourage you guys, that's something you could see on the test, and I don't know if it was in homework or not, but what I'll do is I'm going to make a note about that, and if we have time later on, we're going to come back to that, but that's one that I'm just drawing a blank on. Another thing that you can do is to disable unused ports on your switch. So, has everyone here seen a pizza box switch before? Or know what that looks like? So, if you got a big old pizza box switch, odds are, you may not be using all of those ports at any given time for wired access. So one of the best practices is if that port's not being used, go ahead and disable access to it. So that way that can help prevent a rogue access point or potentially an evil twin, depending on how it's being carried out. That is an attack where, we talked about that Tuesday, but it's no, not a problem at all. And this is a good refresher for me to make sure I was paying attention. So an evil twin is a denial of service. So what you're going to do is if you're going to set up in like Starbucks from your phone or your laptop, you're going to attack their wireless network and take it down, prevent access to it. And you're going to set up your own wireless access point with potentially the same SSID and same password to try to collect data. You're impersonating a legitimate network. And a rogue access point, it's just something that's unauthorized. So another thing you're going to see is to disable unused services or applications. So biggest thing I can think of, if you don't have any reason to be running remote desktop on your Windows machine, you need to disable it. If you aren't running SSH on anything, you need to disable it. It's going ahead and preventing, you don't keep something running if you're not using it. And just by taking those few steps, you're closing some gaps that an adversary could come in and try to take over that machine. One of the biggest things, and I say this now more than ever, is systems updates and service packs. If you don't get anything else from me tonight, for the love of all that is holy on this earth, update your machines. I've worked and helped out with church IT before, and I've seen some horrendous systems. and I won't name the church, but I had one church I was on leadership for that they're like, hey, the Windows machine up in the sound booth's acting up. Could you take a look at it? And I'm like, sure. And I had never seen it before, but it was running Windows XP in 2019. XP. So update your systems, just because if you need to run a legacy system, you make adjustments. But by keeping your machine up to date, you're continuously staying ahead of the curve. If you're running a Windows machine with Windows Defender, by getting those signatures, you're able to better defend your machine. So one of the other things there is using continuous security monitoring, that you're keeping an eye on what's going on in your network. You have an idea what's going on in your house, and you're not finding out when something's breaking. With that, you're taking due care to make sure you have proper monitoring set up, and you're taking due diligence to make sure that things are getting checked. And the other things are remediation policy. So if you run an audit to see how compliant you are with the NIST 800-171, that audit's going to tell you where you're not compliant and where you need to make some adjustments. Another thing is going to be incident handling, response, and reporting. So Ben had mentioned we were running an incident response with a ransomware attack recently, and one of the biggest things I had to learn was, okay, what do I need to be taking notes of here? We had a question that came up of, do we need to contact law enforcement? Who do we call? So there's some things there to be cognizant of, that we don't ever want something to go wrong, but if you're hit with a cyber attack, that... Yes. It did both of those things, Josh. Josh, you're giving me it's a common meme nowadays, and it's probably a little politically incorrect, but the old Vietnam flashback memes, like, Josh, you're giving me one of those here, buddy. So an audit's just kind of going to help identify what you need to do to get back where you need to be. Incident handling is, very simply, what do you do when things go wrong? So, and with firewall, we're going to talk a bit more about that, but that's going to be, figuring out what ports you're blocking, what you're disabling. And the last thing here is going to be when an employee leaves a company, handling, are you going to disable the account, or are you going to delete it? So what we're going to do right now, we're going to take a brief 5-minute break. So let me come over here and stop sharing the screen, but we're going to take a 5-minute break. It is 7:13, so come on back at 7:18, and as Ben says, we're going to keep the dream alive. Thank you, David. Thanks for that reminder, buddy. I'm not leaving the room, so don't worry. I'm going to unmute just so I can respond to Trenton, but yeah, people are still like in the healthcare world offboarding Windows XP. So it's, if you are working in a security company, please, for all that is holy, don't run Windows XP. Upgrade at least to Windows 7. I'm joking. Go keep updates. Run the best and most secure operating system at the moment you can. So to answer your questions now, break has concluded. So this is a practical exercise that we're gonna talk through here. So we started off the slides by talking about defense in depth and talking about an onion. And how you have to assume that one layer is compromised and you need something to catch it. And typically that's done with 5 controls. You have deter, which is something that's going to keep you from going where you don't need to go. Think about the dog that barks, or beware, dog here, dog will bite you. Actually, yeah, I need to share my screen. Guys in chat are keeping me on my toes tonight and holding me accountable. So appreciate that. We'll chat over here. So deterrents, are exactly what it sounds like. It's going to keep you from going somewhere. Delay, it's going to slow you down. So that would be something like a speed bump or a man trap. Something to detect, it's going to be, something like a motion sensor or video cameras. Something that's a control that's going to help you assess. That's going to be something that allows you to keep an eye on the situation at any point. And then recovery is going to be, how do you track down something? How do you make a recovery effort? So, what I'm going to task you guys with is I want you guys to be a little creative for it. And I want you guys to brainstorm some controls for how you would protect the gold we keep at Fort Knox. Money is not an issue. If you draw, I encourage you to draw. You will get brownie points from me if you draw and doodle something. For those of you guys in person, help yourself to the whiteboards. For those of you guys online, feel free to text me and chat. What you guys decide to put, or email me a visual of what you do. So we're going to give you guys 3 minutes to brainstorm some controls here. And, well, you guys here in person could do it as a group exercise. For those of these guys that are online, I encourage you guys to type or use Microsoft Paint. Come up with something. So I'm going to give you guys till 7:24 to brainstorm something here to protect Fort Knox.
So wait a minute.
Yes.
So we're like just anything. We're building a whole fort.
Anything. You're building security.
And what are we protecting? The building or the gold?
Yes.
Okay.
We kind of go together, but maybe not.
So I want you guys to come up with something. Private message it to me in chat if you are online. For those of you guys in person, well, I can hear what you're saying. So I'm going to mute and you guys get started. So.
Intruders do get in, we just nuke the entire thing.
Trenton, that is hilarious. So you guys are getting an additional, well, you guys have another minute. People in chat read and saw. You have an additional 2 minutes. So 1 minute, wrap up ideas, put the gold on, and then we're going to.
So, can you explain recovery again? I just
Gold
wanna make
out
sure.
there.
It's how you're tracking and how you're making sure things can be recovered. So, for instance, that could be a RFID tracking system, a geolocator,
The camera's slightly off too.
So we're gonna give a minute. So,
Stephen Gold.
all right. So
What's the chemical element for gold?
So if you would step away from the board, we are going to have Kincaid pan across the room to show it. So why are you ducking, Katie? Kelsey, why am I thinking Katie's someone online? Never mind. I'm getting people confused.
Would anyone like to explain what we have here?
So let me interpret and try to, just because I don't know if the mic's going to pick up everyone else in the room.
You're still sharing your.
It should be.
Hey, can you
Oh yeah.
unshare your screen? Yeah, thank you.
Yep, we will. And
Well, I guess that's why you're getting, can't get that very top bit of it.
okay. Let me figure out how to get the.
Why is it still saying?
So we've got the screen showed from here in the classroom. So we've got a beautiful set of guard towers. And are those snipers or medieval cannons atop them?
Both.
Yes.
I mean, look, I am a fan. Like, intruders will be shot, survivors hit with an old giant cast iron bowling ball. Like,
Churches, the gold's not actually in.
okay.
It's in heaven.
It's in heaven.
No,
From what it
no,
looks
the
like.
gold, yeah, the
It's
gold,
in heaven.
the gold is buried where here lies Mr. Gold.
You know, I feel like I should hate that a ton more than I actually do. So you guys have a moat around it with alligators, and you've got a big old Trump wall.
Did we add the psychics yet?
Yeah, the psychics are under assessment.
So they added psychics to like just keep tabs of everyone. Then for assessing, they've got a CCTV, watchtower, and psychics. And then recovery, they've got
A shovel.
Shovel for recovery.
Not recovery, no, that was an underground, it's an underground access point.
Underground access point.
Ooh,
Okay.
high tech, we don't need the shovel.
So David in chat has added meth squirrels.
Yeah, we gotta get the meth scrolls
The
on there.
meth squirrels. Kincaid, thank you for doing that. You put the camera back.
Alright. Alright.
So let's review the chat answers.
It's struggling. You're constantly.
Let's see. David was really creative. He told us to put a Taco Bell outside the gate, and you know what? That creates good economy. That helps bolster families that would reside at Fort Knox.
Just have a whole society built around Fort Knox.
Have a whole society built around Fort Knox, and their only source of food is the Taco Bell. He also said he preferred camels, and they spit farther. Trenton had said he wanted to put a big wall with a bunch of snipers, and after that, a 50-yard field with 10,000 landmines, and after that, tanks and dog patrols. To get inside, they would have to cut through 50-inch steel, and after that, the gold is 50 stories underground.
I like how you didn't say the intruder, you just said the
Yep.
person. So like if you were trying to re-get the gold, you had to cut through the steel.
Dude, it's a government conspiracy.
Absolutely.
And then he made and appended that it's a big Trump wall. And, Josh said that, he put perimeter lighting, fencing, guards and entrances, badging for authentication, cameras and access levels per need. And then the last thing before meth squirrels was that some Komodo dragons that drop down from the ceiling and that they'd only feed them once a week.
Why not just real dragons?
I can't argue with Kincaid's logic. Why no real dragons? So this is a fun, goofy exercise. This allows us to have a little bit of fun. But the biggest thing here is to try to think through that defense in depth approach very practically. Does this make sense? Do you guys have any questions about this?
Yes, we need to have that return detect.
Yep.
Return detective on it, assessment.
Yep.
For recovery.
Yep. I'm not sure if you'll see it on the test, but the way they're going to look at on some of the practical exercises, and if you're using the Cyber Ninja, some of the practical exercises there are very close to what you're going to see on tests. You have to practically, if you think through the defense in depth approach, it makes answering a ton of the practical exercises a whole lot easier. So
What's delayed?
that would be like, with the defense in depth approach, it's as much about physical security as it is,
Takes a while.
yeah. It's, you can have all of these software controls and security implementations on your network, but someone can come straight through the front door. It doesn't matter. So, we're going to do, and give me a moment to get set back up. Then don't worry, WebEx people, I'm about to share my screen. So let me pull the chat again. I gotta be honest, that's the first time I've heard meth squirrels as an answer. And I kind of dig it. So we're gonna run through some more slides and then go through another practical exercise here in a bit. So we've talked about the DMZ briefly previously before, and that's, it's an untrusted area where your organizational assets are more easily accessed from the internet. So you can set up a DMZ to prevent access into more sensitive areas. One of the things that a DMZ has to have to be properly configured, and I'd encourage you, jot this down or put a little highlight on your notes. You need to have an internal network. So you need to have something you're keeping internal secure. You need to have something public facing to the internet. And then lastly, you need the DMZ. And this is a term that you will see on your test. I know I've seen it. I've had a couple people that have taken the test that have seen this. It's something called a Bastion host. And that's just simply a device that is outside the DMZ. Here we've got some lovely, lovely pictures of a DMZ infrastructure. So typically what you're going to see is your DMZ will be configured, and it's things that you put in between two firewalls. So you're going to have an enterprise LAN network, you're going to have a firewall. Then you're going to have, in that area within your DMZ, you're going to either see like a mail server or a web server, some things that need to have access to the open internet for you to have connectivity, and you're going to have a router, and then you're going to have another firewall between that, and then you're just going to have your open internet. So it's best way, I think, practically, it's a network that's sandwiched between two routers. That's in between your internal network and your external internet access. Does that make sense? Yes. A Bastion host, it's in the DMZ. So if you look here with the DMZ network architecture, that Bastion host is going to be something in between those two firewalls. Yes, theoretically. Let me actually go back. So actually, I stand corrected. It's outside the DMZ. So it would be something on the other. So you have the sandwiched firewall. So a Bastion host would be something on this side of the firewall, closer out towards the internet. So that could be something like a Honeypot. Well, good question, Josh. And then here we've got another network topology, which you set up for you to look at and adore. So to answer your follow-up question, yes to both. You can have your own Bastion host set up, but as with anything, if you wanted a third-party one set up, you could. It really just comes down to what you and that network, what needs to be configured. So, shoot, jumped out of myself there. So another aspect of network hardening is figuring out, how to obtain information about your network. So there's some easy-to-use command line tools. So for everyone that is here listening to my voice, and everyone here, with the exception of Kelsey, is running a Windows device. So I want you guys to, you can hit the Windows key in R, and that's going to bring up run. And then I'm going to want you guys to type in CMD, and that's going to bring up your command prompt. And I want you guys to type in ipconfig, then ipconfig /R. So I think for you,
It's
Kelsey,
my terminal.
yeah, and it would be, I think you might use ifconfig.
Yeah,
I think because Mac's running a Linux OS. So
So what would I?
So second command there, type in ifconfig in terminal. So it's, what you guys should see is you should see some basic information about your network. You're going to see your IP address, you're going to see your subnet mask, and your default gateway. So that's something we'll talk through a little bit more at a later point, but that's something fun for you guys to know. So one of the things we've already talked through is figuring out how you handle remote access to a machine. And so identify anything that's necessary for your network. So if you have remote call procedure call, that's going to give you a graphical interface, and virtual network computing, VNC, those are two protocols that you're going to use for remote access that give you a graphical display. For secure shell, you're going to use that to come into a terminal environment, and you see that used a ton with servers for remote configuration management. And secure copy, with that one, it can run over a shell or be graphical. So, port question. What port does SSH run over? Okay. Those of you guys in chat, what port does SSH run over? It's running over port 22. So for you guys to be using SSH on a network, you're going to need to have port 22 punched open. So there's some tools and things that you can get that will help you support implementations for network security. So a firewall, it's a device that you set up to filter traffic based on a set of defined parameters, such as IP address and port numbers. This is your first line of defense on your network. When something's coming in, if it can get past that firewall, they then have access to your net to try to get into your network. If your firewall's properly configured to stop someone from coming in, they ain't getting any closer. Typically, like we showed you on that graph, it's placed at the perimeter of your network. And with it, it's going to block traffic based on port and protocol rules. So an IDS is interesting. It's an intrusion detection system. And it's going to monitor traffic for malicious activity or policy violations. So this is going to come after the firewall or set up as an end host. And all it's going to be doing is monitoring and detecting. It's going to send out an alert or an alarm when something's wrong. With this, I almost think of it as the neighborhood watch. To see something, say something. That it's going to notify you something's wrong, but it's not necessarily going to fix it. And the types of detection you have with it, you have anomaly-based for something outside of the norm. You have signature-based where it's going to go, okay, this lines up with a predefined parameter, or this lines up with a common signature that we've associated with this virus or piece of malicious software. An intrusion prevention system, it sets up and it inspects traffic and it classifies it, but what it'll do is it'll attempt to stop it dead in its tracks. So, intrusion detection system, it's your neighborhood watch. I honestly think of your intrusion prevention system, it's a law enforcement officer. It's someone that's, hey, I'm responding to this. I'm going to stop this threat at whatever cost. And if I need to, I have tools I can use to take out that threat. So this one, again, it's placed after the firewall, but it'll send an alert when something goes wrong, but it's going to go ahead and respond. It's similar to the other one. It's going to, you have some anomaly-based detection, signature-based detection with it. So are there any questions about those three devices?
Why are 0 day?
So with that, once a 0 day is identified,
Then it'll have a signature for it.
yeah.
I like it. Well,
Well, it's one. Typically, when a 0 day attack or 0 day vulnerability is found, regardless of whether or not there's an exploit for it, there's going to be a notice. So for instance, I see a ton on exploit DB where 0 day vulnerabilities have been found, but they haven't been exploited. So it's possible, and again, I'm not as familiar with it myself, but it's possible based on that vulnerability to implement that into some audit. So when it comes to figuring out, one of the things that we talk about is detection and prevention. So detection, here on the slide it says imbalancing systems throughout your host and or network to identify specific types of activity. It's simply finding out what's going on. And prevention is a little more active and intentional. It's taking measures you're making adjustments to your network and systems to prevent something from occurring. So, some systems that are set up to detect and prevent, we talked about Kerberos, which runs on what port? Yep. And Kerberos, it'll go ticket, please. And it goes to authenticate you to a domain. And I honestly can't make heads or tails of why var log is there. So I'll need to make a note of that. But we've talked about and one thing you will see on the test, if they throw acronyms at you, you're going to see IDS and IDP and IPS, but you're going to see an N or an H in front of it. And on the test, that N or H is going to help determine where that IDS or IPS is sitting. So an N in front of it stands for network. So you set up that IDS or IPS to run on the network. And an H is going to be host. So that it's an intrusion detection or an intrusion prevention system that's running on a local host machine. I go ahead and tell you guys to make note of that now because I know that tripped me up preparing for this exam. Yep. So, yep. And the only reason I encourage you guys to be looking at that is because if you're in your test room and you've got a ton of questions and you're brain dead a little in.
What was that you wanted? I'm sorry.
So let me back up because I had a couple guys in chat that have asked me to clarify a little better. So, and I'm trying to I can't even remember the question, but if you are needing to run an intrusion detection system to monitor a network, where would you put that? Would you put that on your router, firewall, server, or would you put that on a desktop machine someone's using? If you're needing to monitor your network, you're going to put it on the network. If you're needing to monitor something on a host or on a device, you're going to put that on a host. Oftentimes on the test, they're going to put these acronyms in. And, CompTIA, you need to be looking for keywords about where this IDS or IPS is placed because the last three letters look the same, regardless of whether you're dealing with NIDS, NIPS, HIDS, HIPS, it's going to look the same. And it's really easy to get tripped up on that. Does that explain that a little more clearly?
So always in our name.
Yeah. Okay. So we come to the fun part. We have a honeypot. Why are we talking about honeypots and there's not a picture of Winnie the Pooh?
Because it's
Copyright.
copyrighted.
Copyright. Kincaid.
Yep.
Make a note. We need to bug Ben to adjust the slides. We need to put Winnie the Pooh on it.
Okay.
We need to put Winnie the Pooh. Look. He's going to give us grief. So we got something here. So a honeypot, and a honeypot's a device that's set up to gain intel. It's set up as a device that if a hacker or adversary is going to begin poking and prodding a network, they're going to go to that honeypot. It's the easy target. But with the use of a honeypot, there's some legal issues. You have an issue of enticement, which is luring someone towards certain evidence after that individual has already committed the crime. So it's, they've already broken into the server, and you go to push them further in. And you kind of go, well, hey, you've broke this server, but if you come over here to this device, you can get credit card data. I don't know why my throat's giving out. So, whereas entrapment, it's encouraging someone to commit a crime that may not have committed it otherwise. So, for those of you guys that would want my opinion, I think those legal issues, personally, I don't see an issue. I think it's called you don't poke around where you don't need to be, you're not going to get into trouble.
So, if a company is making some sort of security system, external or whatever, and they want to get data from something that may be attacked,
Yeah.
they can set up a honeypot and they can do it.
Yep.
But that wouldn't be illegal if they're not trying to do legal action. Right?
Yeah. So biggest thing, and what I think about the biggest benefit with a honeypot is you're able to get data in real time against someone that's attacking your network. You're able to get an idea of what tools are being used, what techniques they're doing, what vulnerabilities are they looking at. And if you use it effectively, I think it gives you a decent bit of lead time that someone's coming, knocking, trying to scout you out to attack you. It gives you time to raise your walls and to tighten down. So it can be a key part of any threat management or threat intelligence system. So some things to keep in mind when you have to report on an incident. It's an alarm. When that goes on, that's an indication that something's gone wrong. It's like how when you only pull the fire alarm when there's a fire. An alarm's going to run a trip within an IDS, IPS, or a scene, when something's gone wrong. An alert typically is something, that it's pressing, it's something that needs to be addressed, but it's typically a system issue. So, you'll get an alert if a machine's, hey, your hard drive is nearly filled up. You either need to get a bigger hard drive or you need to remove some stuff. And then trends, that's just, the current threat trajectory. You're looking at what's based on what's occurred before, what's going to happen now. So system hardening, what does it mean to harden an organization's resources? Based on what we talked about, what do you guys think hardening actually means? Chat, what do you guys think hardening means? Okay. So when you harden an organization's resources, you're making it harder to get into that device. You're making sure things are more secure than what they were before. So with system services, you're going to be adjusting what's running on that system. You're going to be turning services on, off as you need and making adjustments. Like I talked about, if you're not needing a remote desktop, you turn it off. If you don't need telnet, you turn it off. For peripheral systems, that's going to be making adjustments to, hey, someone could very easily mess up with a USB mouse or keyboard. And it's taking into account how allow people to use a mouse so that they can better work, but taking steps to make sure that they're using proper tools, using the proper drivers. With network shares, that's a big one. That if you're running a file backups to a local machine or to a local server, that, hey, those shares are secured and people that need access to those shares are the only ones that got it. And then, of course, with software, it's, so when I think about software and hardening, I have a story that now, I won't name who told me the story, but all I heard was someone went to an ISM at Marshall and requested to get an exception to allow this lab to run, and I kid you not, Minecraft for team building. Look, I would have bought that, but it's making sure what's running on the machine needs to be on the machine. So with system settings, it's the biggest thing when I think about system settings with regards to an OS, I really think through things when everything else fails. When an intruder's broken in through your network, they've broken through your firewall, they've gotten past your IDS, IPS, your SIEM, whatever tools you're running. What you've set up on an operating system is probably the last line of defense. I mean, it's effectively, the walls have all come down and it's that final stronghold. And there's some things to bear in mind here. Just about any security guideline and best practice is going to stress you. Remove unneeded services and software. If you have a server, it should be dedicated to a particular function. I would strongly urge against running. I've seen on one customer in time volunteering that smaller businesses, they'll have their email, their Active Directory, their file backups, and their DHCP all running on one box. And that one machine, if you have a machine running Active Directory, that's probably going to have enough vulnerabilities as is. And each service that you add on top of that adds an additional vulnerability or risk.
So if they're all virtual, does that reduce the risk of having modifications?
Yes, depending on how you have it virtualized. So, and we could get into a whole conversation about Microsoft Azure and so some of the fun with that. And it's one of those things that every service adds a risk to the security posture of an organization. That's just a part of the reality we live in. Removing and disabling unneeded services, it's going to lessen the probability something's going to go wrong with it. Limiting the number of services, it creates a cleaner configuration and it helps in managing. You don't have to dig through as many services to find what's going on if you're troubleshooting. By limiting the number of services, that's one less thing you need to worry about vulnerabilities and patching. And by customizing the number of services, it promotes a functionality delineation among services and it helps support public versus private. So with file systems, and this is something that it's good to know. I've heard some people say they've seen it on the test. I've seen a couple that said they have. So it's not something that we're going to delve into tonight, but as you do some reading and homework, something good to be cognizant of. So default accounts and passwords. So one of the things that I'd encourage, and it's best practice, when you get a device, change the default password for admin on it. Please. It's you have I can't remember what the stat is, Ben will quote, but more people don't change that password than do. So think about it this way for security posture. If you come here to Cyber Protects and you connect to our guest network, and we have our wireless access point, we hadn't changed the default admin password. Well, if you decide to go to Dr. Google and find that password, you can go into that router and you can adjust settings to get more access than you need. Just like the other night when we showed off Wiggle, that war driving tool, and Ben showed that, hey, you can go and Google based on the MAC address, you can find a default password. But you're actually seeing vendors now more and more days, they're using unique default passwords to where you're just getting a randomized set of like 10 to 12 characters for a password. Is that secure? In theory, yes. Should you keep it? Probably not. And and for other things, you see what's talked about this thing called two-factor authentication. We're using alternative authentication methods. So, they talk about Kerberos as being used for multi-factor authentication based on a ticket. You can get now with Google Authenticator to where you generate a random 6-digit key every minute to back up that if you're logging into Facebook, you need to put in a PIN from there to authenticate you are who you are.
So Kerberos says multi-factor or
It depends. That sort of best practice is if you can use two-factor authentication, you use it.
and it's important.
Yeah. The biggest thing that you can see, especially with Windows in the Active Directory world, is that the first time you log into your account, you have to change the password. And it's that first time you log in, you got to change your password. Restricting network access, you're restricting what's coming into your network and what's coming out. And lastly, you need to identify which products might have some default passwords. So what I'm going to do, and part of this is I don't know what's coming on with my throat. Just I'm talking. So let's take a 5-minute break. I need to get some water. So it is 7:58. So let's reconvene at 8:03, and then we'll keep the dream alive. All right, so let me get screen share back going. So let me get this going down here. So one of the things that it's good to know within the context of the Security Plus. Now, you may or may not see this on the test, but so it's a good idea to understand what's a scripting language versus what is a programming language. And this little chart does a good job, I think, of covering that. So, not going to delve too deep into that, but if you have questions about that, you email it to me, and we can deal with that. Now, the fun thing here is with programming vulnerabilities. So what they've put here is it describes a category of a control and the exploit included with it in the countermeasure. So an input validation, Ben talked about that he developed a piece of software that would send queries or data back to a server, and he kept opening connections but not closing, and it caused a buffer overflow. Input validation limits what's going into a program so that it's not overriding that data buffer. Cross-site scripting and SQL injection, you're interfering with what's going on in that system to try to get something you want. So Ben told a story about a dude who was able to do a SQL injection at BestBuy.com and was able to buy an expensive flat screen TV for $0.01. Or was it $0.01 or $1?
I think
It's a dollar.
It was $1.
No, you said dollar.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't really.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
He was able to go in and change it.
Okay. Trenton chimed in on chat that it was $1. So, how you fix that is that string has an end with a set length and a possible range of values. You define what that buffer is so people can't overwrite it. For authentication, that's as you connect and authenticate to a resource. An exploit for that's network sniffing, running a packet capture, just getting credentials, running a brute force or dictionary attack to break a password, using session hijacking, and credential theft. And the countermeasure for it is you're going to deny telnet, you're going to remove RSH, and other clear text authentication methods. For configuration management, you're going to have unauthorized access, or a big word here, lack of non-repudiation. And non-repudiation basically just means you can't deny what you put or said. Very simply. And your countermeasure for that is to establish clear commissions based on least privilege or least functionality. Then with sensitive data, the exploit is who has access to the data. And the countermeasure for it is you're establishing set permissions for who can access it and who can store it. And we can go through this, but with cryptography, one of the exploits is poor key generation, and they give you a countermeasure. So, again, I encourage you guys to review this. I'm not going to sit here and waste your time just reading off a slide. So we got a little pie chart here. And this is from GeekFlow. And this is referring to a chart of web application vulnerabilities. I believe that's what it is. Yep. Vulnerabilities and malware. So the biggest piece of that pie that's been hit is with cross-site scripting. And that makes up about 25% of attacks on web applications. 23%, another close competitor, is with information leakage. So something's getting out. And then next off, about 15%, it's an issue of authentication authorization. People being careless or info getting out. And that's just me looking at this graph. I don't know what the person that put this together, what they were thinking or intended.
What is cross-site scripting?
Kincaid, what's cross-site scripting?
Cross-site scripting?
Yes.
Good question. Let's look it up.
I guess I can't pick on you like Ben does. So
I look it up with him too.
I mean, there's a demo of it. I just can't remember with it. So it's an injection, similar to SQL. I think it's just a difference of language. So, or JavaScript, Kincaid.
Yep.
The answer was on the following slide.
Oh, nice.
So, cross-site scripting, they're submitting a JavaScript tag as input, which is then implemented when the user loads the page. So, effectively, they're writing their own JavaScript code that's going to trigger on the website. And a SQL injection is going to do the same thing. So, if you were to take a text box, and this is me just thinking hypothetically example here, may not be the most technically correct answer, but if you were to take a input box to a Google form, and it's a, hey, you can win a Nintendo Switch or something like that. Well, if you use that text box, you could write as your answer some JavaScript code to try to manipulate the page and get access. So it's taking advantage of an input field or taking advantage of what you're being given on your browser to push code back to the web server. So, one of the biggest things with web applications that you're going to see, and the biggest thing I think you're going to come across is something being misconfigured. And it's going to be, I'm trying to think how to best explain some of this. So, I'm going to go ahead and just jump ahead, particularly just because you guys have the charts here with the comparison. So let's see. Okay, so one of the things here that I do want to harp on, and it's using or continued use of known vulnerable components. So one of the things that lists here is using code with MD5 checks or from open sites such as GitHub. And the countermeasure to things like that, it's patching and it's only downloading data from trusted sites. It's a thing here. Any of you guys read the book as a kid, if you give a mouse a cookie, if you give a mouse a cookie, what is he going to want? Yeah, but what is he eventually going to want? Another cookie. If you give a hacker a cookie, what are they going to want? If you give a hacker a cookie, they're bound to want to have some personal data. And if he's given personal data, what is he going to want next? Exactly. He's going to want cash. He's going to want money. So either they're going to sell your data on the dark web, or if they're able to get your social security number, your date of birth, your full legal name, and maybe get your mother's maiden name, they might have a shopping spree on a credit card.
But basically they're saying don't use anything open source.
Well, it's saying use something you can trust. So like with it, it's saying using code without an MD5 check. An MD5 check, that's a hash, and it generates a value that if you're given a hash and then you run on a site that, hey, this piece of code has this hash, and then you download it and it has a different hash, it's been altered.
Yeah, it's just if you have an organization managing open source anything, get the hash separate from the site.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump around here. So let me go here because I feel like we're coming to the end of the class, and I feel like you guys have listened to me talk enough, especially those of you guys that were in person that heard me all outside. So let me jump down here. Okay. So we're going to walk through a couple practical exercises here. Let me go ahead and get this slide up on screen. So we talked about multi-factor authentication, and it's something that's implemented, I don't know if anyone else here is a part of InfraGard, perchance, but InfraGard's a partnership between private industry with the FBI, and they have an intel database, and they post public reports. When I go to log into my InfraGard account, I have to give them a PIN from my phone. So one of the things they talk about with authentication is you need to have two of something, and it's these 5 things. So something it's something that you have knowledge of. So it's going to be your password, your username, for instance. Something you have, it's going to be your CAT card, or it could be using MS Authenticator, Google Authenticator.
The PIN on your phone is considered something you have.
Yes. Something you do is something that I hadn't seen authenticated a ton, but it's based off of your behavior while using a machine. So that type of authentication really relies on us as humans being creatures of habit. That if we keep doing something the same way, we're going to keep on doing it.
That'd be like credit card watching.
That's exactly what I think with it. So it's like when your credit card flags a transaction because you decide to take an impromptu trip. It's like, hey, this seems sus. We're gonna flag it. Something you are, that's referring to biometrics. So it's going to be your thumbprint, it's going to be your eyeball. And somewhere you are, that's going to be a geolocation. So if you've logged into Facebook before, any account, I don't know if any of you guys got the emails before, but it's like I saw one from Spotify where apparently I had logged in Cuba to my account. So we have been recruited by Amazon to help them implement 5-way authentication in the Seattle headquarters. So I want you guys to message me 5 different controls that would meet each of these criteria. Be as creative as you can. And I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes to think through that. It doesn't have to be hard. If you have questions, feel free to message me in the chat. So I'm going to mute and let you guys see that. Trenton, that is spot on. Actually, that last one's a little off, and I'll explain that in a moment. Shane, good answer. David, correct? Chelsea, that was right.
Okay, I didn't read that, I didn't read what that said before, I'm not gonna lie.
Yep. So right now we're at time. So send me what you've got. So let me. So something you are, and I saw a couple guys answer this one a little weird. So something you are and something that's unique to who you are. So, if you take off, if I take off my glasses and I go hold my eye up to a scanner, the blood vessels in the back of my eye are unique to me. Your fingerprint is unique to you. It's something that's a physical, unique characteristic about you. So, what was listed for someone, they said something you are is that must be a staff member with the right credentials, which technically, you could be right, but that's not what we're looking for. So something it's typically a username and password. Kincaid?
I'm not wrong.
Okay. So Kincaid's answer, and let me go ahead and tell you, for what you know, I'm in a fraternity where that is a valid way to verify someone's identity. But he said you had to have the secret handshake to get in with the password associated, have the cool friendship bracelet given out at the Christmas party with RFID chip. Dude, gotta give the plug walk while entering each time. Be at the secret underground Amazon base, or need to give the footprint.
I was going to go with full body scan, but I just blanked at that last second.
Just, what are your guys' thoughts on that? Solid?
You told us to be
Creative. Yep.
You see, that's the mistake everyone always gives me.
Can you explain what the something you do? I thought that might have to.
So, in my experience, and this is one I've not seen implemented.
Yeah.
So it's looking off of basically your patterns. So, for instance, each morning when I get up about 6 a.m. I make my coffee, get some breakfast, and about 7 o'clock, I'm signing in. I'm checking my emails for school, for work. It's something you do. In my experience, it relies on the fact that as humans, we're creatures of habit.
Well, we've got a lab upstairs for programmers, and if I ever saw the light on, I would know that there's somebody that's unauthorized.
Yep.
There's also,
They would never turn the light on.
do you play video games? Yeah, so you know how a lot of bot things will be able to detect if someone's just like, whoosh, because that's not normal human behavior. Yeah. As that's something you do. Normal people don't like flick like that. And so you can immediately check. Yeah.
Yep.
That's the only one I've ever, I've actually seen that one done.
Yep.
Weird.
So we're going to do one more exercise, and then I'll cut you guys loose here for the night. I apologize again for class getting started late. That is firmly and solidly my fault. I'll own that. So what's interesting, and this isn't something you're really going to see on the test, but it's a fun thought exercise. So you have three categories when we talk about crime. You have crime against computers, where you're targeting and aiming to destroy a machine. You have a crime where a computer is incidental, meaning that wasn't exactly the main target. Then you have a crime using computers. So what I want you guys to do, a virus has been rapidly spread. I'll read these out. I'm going to ask you guys to take a stab at what it is. And we'll go over answers, talk through this a little more next class. I believe that's where we'll cover this. So virus has been spreading rapidly across an Apple system, deleting files and shutting down critical functions. What type of crime do you guys think that is?
Against computers.
Against computers? Josh, it's not COVID. What? I don't even know how to respond to that. Is it February 31st?
You don't have to.
Or February 32nd.
32nd? Okay. So I would concur. I almost feel like that would be where a computer's incidental.
There you go. Something to hear about.
Yeah, I mean,
Why would there be a crime against computer?
I don't know. The slide asks it. I mean,
Does that make nobody care?
yeah. Well, people could care if a machine's damaged or unable to be used.
Well, that's why it was shutting down critical functions. So it's
Yeah,
hurting
crime against computers. I could buy that.
Yeah, but that doesn't make any sense. I mean,
Yeah.
You don't attack it. You don't attack digits. I mean, you
Yeah.
attack people.
So, second one, ex-employee launches a DDoS attack against one of Microsoft's email servers using a botnet of employee systems.
that will show them.
That'll show them. Labor revolution, right? No, never mind. I tried that communism joke fell flat on its face.
What would a perfect one, really? I mean,
It would be vindictive. It would be kind of like, you fired me.
but like,
So a mentor of mine, and it wasn't to this extent, it wasn't illegal, but he was fired or he had left a job, and these guys were jerks. So at the end, he decided, I'm going to change all the admin passwords to I don't know. So that when they called him going, hey, what was your last password? He's like, I don't know. So with this one, this is definitely a crime using computers. So I'm going to stop sharing just so we can do that. Do you guys have any questions about what we covered tonight? I realize I was a little late getting started. And starting off, I was a little off my game. So
I don't understand. So you won't get the test, so why would?
now, so what I'm going to do for this, because I realize this exercise is a little confusing, I'm going to do some reading and research, and I'm going to talk with Ben and see what this one is more specifically, and we may revisit it next week.
Awesome.
So, no questions, everything makes sense, hopefully. Okay. So, you guys already, I believe Ben sent out the homework for Domain 2.
I mean,
From last class, was it Domain 1 or Domain 2?
Oh, no, it was for Domain 2.
Okay, so if you hadn't finished the homework for Domain 2, work on it. When you get it done, feel free, please email it to me or to Ben. So, but if you have questions, feel free to email me, and I'm putting my email in the chat.
He copied it.
Yep, he copied me on the last email that was sent out to the whole class. So,
So we've got it. Well, BCC doesn't put you on it.
yep, so feel free to email me. I'll do my best to get to everyone, and everyone, with that, I'm going to go and conclude class. You guys have an awesome weekend, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Maybe is it in our homework or is that the homework?
That's the homework for this domain. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.